Okay, so this video is going to cover Chapter 3 of Advancing Vocabulary Skills. If you want to follow along in your book, go ahead and open up to page 16. If you want to take a moment and pause on this page and try to make a guess as to the parts of speech, go ahead and do that. Let me go ahead and read through them to give you some clues. Ambiguous, the clue is at the end, O-U-S. Dissident, embellish, fritter. Don't be fooled by the ER, that's not a clue in this case. Inadvertent, inane, juxtaposed, lethargy, sporadic, and subsidized. That IZE is a clue at the end. So our first word here is ambiguous, and this one is an adjective. The portrait known as the Mona Lisa is famous for the woman's ambiguous expression. Is she smiling or not? Omar left an ambiguous message on my answering machine. Meet me at 12 o'clock. I couldn't tell whether he meant noon or midnight. Ambiguous means is unclear. If we look at the word itself, ambiguous, it has this first part, ambi. And ambi, you may have heard other words like ambidextrous, but ambi means both. So when we talk about something ambiguous, it means it's unclear because it has more than one possible meaning, so that it could be interpreted in more than one way. In the picture of Mona Lisa, you could look at the picture and say that she's smiling, or you could say, no, she looks unhappy. Similarly, in the second example, if someone says, me at 12 o'clock, that could mean 12 o'clock midnight, or it could also mean 12 o'clock noon. So ambiguous means unclear in the sense of that something is unclear because it could have more than one possible meaning. And so again, the focus is on the meaning. So we wouldn't really say like, oh, I couldn't see because my window was unclear, so it was ambiguous. We wouldn't use it in that way. It means that the meaning of something is unclear. Our next one here is dissident, and this one is a noun. Some dissidents in the Catholic Church favor such changes as allowing women to be priests and allowing priests to marry. In a dictatorship, dissidents are not tolerated. People who speak out against the government may be imprisoned or even executed. So what a dissident is a rebel. On page 17, dissident is number 5. A person opposed to established ideas or beliefs, especially in politics or religion. So a dissident is a rebel. So what we mean by that is it's someone who's standing up against an established or an organized authority, and fighting against that authority because they disagree with the rules or the laws of that authority. We could say, like teenagers are rebels, but we wouldn't say they're dissidents. They're rebels in the sense of they rebel against their parents. They're fighting against their parents. But a dissident is more of an organized rebellion. A dissident is a person who has specific grievances or disagreements with the government or with the religion, and are specifically standing up to change certain laws or to change a certain thing in the government. Our next one here is embellish, and this one is a verb. Lauren embellished the door of her room with postcards from her friends and photos of her cats. The cover of the biology textbook was embellished with a pattern of colorful seashells. So what embellish means is to decorate. Pardon me. On page 17, it's number 6, to decorate and beautify by adding details. So when we talk about embellishing something, what we mean is that we're making it look nicer or appear nicer or seem nicer. But we're not actually changing the core of it. So, for example, if you look at this picture here, the embellishments are things like the flower and the leaf. You could also say the raspberry and the chocolate sauce. But really the embellishments are things that just make the food in this case look nicer. It's not part of the actual dish. It's not part of the dessert. It's just something that's added on that makes it look nicer. It doesn't change the actual content. Embellish is often also used when we talk about stories. So if you embellish a story, it means that you're adding details or information to a story that don't actually change the meaning of the story, but make it seem nicer than it is. Our next word here is fritter, and this is a verb. I thought my little sister would fritter away her entire allowance on M&Ms, but instead of wasting her money, she put it in her piggy bank. Vince fritters away both his time and his money playing game after game in video arcades. So what fritter is to waste. On page 17, it's number 8, to spend or waste a little at a time. So when you're frittering away something, it doesn't mean that you're spending huge amounts of money on things. So it doesn't mean that you're being extravagant. Extravagant meaning that you're being wasteful in your spending, but you're spending a lot of money. Fritter means that little by little, you're wasting something. So in the first one, she's worried about her sister, little by little, wasting her monies on M&M. Those of you guys who drink coffee, you may have this experience, and I actually just got a coffee machine so that I wouldn't fritter my money on coffee, because, for one cup of coffee you might think, oh, it's just $2, but over time, if you get that every day of the week, that's $10 over the course of a month, that's $40 over the course of the year. Now we're getting into $400 or $500 that you're wasting over the course of the year. So, but a fritter really means a little at a time. You're wasting it a little bit at a time. The next word here is inadvertent, and this one is an adjective. Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin was inadvertent. He forgot to cover a dish of bacteria, and some mold got into it. The next day, Fleming found the mold had killed the bacteria. The final draft of Nancy's paper was shorter than the previous version, but this was inadvertent. She'd accidentally deleted an entire page without realizing it. So what it means is not intended or accidental. On page 17, it's number 9, unintentional or accidental. Inadvertent has this meaning of that someone has one goal, but on the way to that goal, they make some sort of mistake or unintentionally have something else happen than what was intended or what was planned. Our next word here is inane, and this one is an adjective. The conversation at the party was inane, consisting mainly of foolish comments about those whose clothes were the most awesome. Television programming is often so inane that TV has been described as bubblegum of the mind. So what inane in this case is silly. Now, an easy word to get this word confused with is the word insane, because basically they're the same except for one letter, but they really don't mean the same thing. Insane means crazy, right? As though you have some sort of mental problem. But inane has a different meaning entirely. Inane on page number 17 is number 4, without sense or foolish. So if something is inane, it means that someone is doing it in sort of a silly way. So in the first one is saying the party conversation was inane, meaning that. Our next one here is juxtapose, and this is a verb. The photograph dramatically juxtaposed white birch trees and a dark gray sky. Dottie spread her new dress out on the bed and then juxtaposed all of her scarves and jackets to see which combination would look best. So what juxtapose means to put side by side. But the added meaning that's not there is also that the reason that you're putting two things side by side is to compare the two things. What it really means is to put things together especially things that are not normally together, in order to compare them or to make something new. So in the first example, it's saying the photograph dramatically juxtaposed white trees and a dark gray sky. So the reason for that is, the white and the dark of the gray, there's a contrast between them, and what the author or the photographer wants you to do is to look at that difference, to be aware of that difference. In the second example, she's juxtaposing these different clothing out there to create a new outfit, but she's comparing the scarves and the jackets. What she wants in those two things is for people to be able to see the contrast between the things. If you look at the picture also, you see the new fence and the old fence are juxtaposed. So the new fence is made out of metal, and the old fence, I guess that's made out of trees or woods. I'm not really sure. But the point being, you're saying that they're juxtaposed because there's once you put them side by side, you can see a very obvious difference between the two of them. Our next word here is lethargy, and this one is a noun. Although Wendy seemed to recover from the flu, her lethargy persisted. She felt exhausted for weeks. With the hot weather, lethargy descended upon the class. The students had trouble staying awake, and even the instructor gazed dreamily out the window. Lethargy means weariness. On page 17, lethargy is number 2, a great lack of energy, inactiveness due to laziness or sluggishness. So when we think about lethargy, what we're talking about is, a feeling of tiredness or weariness, normally associated with a kind of laziness that comes from working too hard, or also oftentimes lethargy is associated with weather. So that you feel the adjective of this is lethargic, which is a feeling that you have when you have no energy or no interest in doing something. Our next word here is sporadic, and this one is an adjective. It rained continuously until noon. After that, there were only sporadic showers. Dave makes sporadic attempts to give up smoking, but his occasional efforts have been half-hearted. So what sporadic means is irregular. On page 17, sporadic is number 10, happening now and then, occasionally. So when we say that something is sporadic, we mean that it happens, like it says, now and again, but not with any consistency. One of the things I think that a lot of us may struggle with or do sporadically is like dieting. You get a lot of energy, especially around, January or after New Year's. You're like, I'm going to diet and exercise, and I'm going to do all of these things. But after a while, your effort becomes sporadic. So in the first week, you're really, really good about it. The second week, you cheat a little bit. The third week, maybe you don't do anything. And then it becomes sort of this half-hearted thing that is very irregular or very sporadic. And our last word here is subsidize, and this one is a verb. During college, many students are subsidized by their parents, while others rely on grants or loans. Public television is subsidized by various grants and by individuals and community donations. Subsidized means is to pay for. Now you'll notice in both of these sentences we see subsidized followed by. Now subsidized doesn't always have to be followed by, but you'll notice that in both of these sentences subsidized is used in the passive tense. So it's saying many students are subsidized, and then the by phrase is the people who actually pay for whatever it is. So in the first example, what it's saying is that the parents pay for the student's college. In the second one, it's saying that the grants pay for the public television. So it doesn't always have to come with by, but oftentimes you'll see that Subsidize is used in this passive tense. On page 17, subsidize is number 7. It means to support financially, to provide a grant or a contribution. So when we use the word subsidize, really we're talking about someone is giving money for some specific purpose, for some specific goal. So in the first one, the students are subsidized by their parents, and specifically what the parents are paying for is college. In the second one, the specific thing that is being paid for is, running of the public television, like PBS, is paid for by people outside of the actual program. Okay. So that's it. So go ahead and make sure that you do the online activities and any questions that you've been given.